Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Susan Muller. I am the Business Development Manager at BuzzSumo. Today, we're going to be talking about influencer outreach best practices. The webinar is being presented by BuzzSumo and BuzzStream, and we have two presenters, Paul May and Steve Rayson. Today, I wanted to just give you a little bit of information before we get started, kind of housekeeping things. I anticipate that the webinar will not last any longer than an hour. We're planning on about 45 minutes worth of content from the presenters, and there will also be significant time that we can use to address any questions that you have. We have a recording being created as we speak, so the webinar will be available as a recording. We'll send you a link to that as soon as it's ready. We'll also send you a link to a SlideShare deck that you can use if you want to kind of look at the content again later. We have a hashtag for the webinar. If you're on Twitter and you want to go ahead and use that, that would be great. And now let me introduce you to our speakers. We have Paul May, who is the co-founder and CEO of BuzzStream. And we also have Steve Rayson, who is the founder and director of BuzzSumo. Steve is going to begin the presentation, and I'll turn the mic over to him.
Hi, Susan. That's great. Thanks very much for that. That's great. I'm pleased to be here today with everyone. I think Susan said at the beginning that we have people from all over the world. I'm actually in Eastern Australia, so it's still relatively early in the morning for me at the moment. But yes, thank you very much for coming along. And yeah, we've got some interesting stuff to go through today. I'm going to basically set the scene with some principles and guidelines around influencer marketing, and then Paul's going to do more of the hard work. Paul's going to take you through a real practical case study of how to run an influencer marketing campaign and how to use BuzzStream and BuzzSumo as part of that. So that's how we're going to structure it. I'm going to kick off for sort of 15 minutes or so with a bit of background. So, okay. So I suppose the starting point is what is an influencer? What do we mean by an influencer? It's a term that gets bandied around quite a lot these days. So what do we mean by it? And I suppose what we mean by an influencer is really somebody who has the ability to amplify your content or your brand message. So we're really looking for somebody who can amplify what you're doing. And in particular, if you're doing content marketing, they can amplify your content. And that becomes important in terms of how people discover your content. Typically, content gets amplified, as we know, in a number of ways. It can get amplified by people linking to your content, and it can get amplified by people sharing your content. And Shareaholic did a survey recently where they said that basically I think over 35% of all traffic to websites comes from social media sites, Facebook being the largest one. So a lot of people are now discovering content through social media. Actually less discover it through Google, interestingly, although obviously people do very specific searches on Google. Content can also be amplified, obviously, through paid promotion, and Paul's going to cover that in his case study later. But we want people to share and link to our content, and influencers have a role to play in this. However, an influencer isn't somebody simply with lots of followers, and I think this is a mistake lots of people make, is that person must be an influencer because they have 100,000 followers. And that's actually not necessarily the case. An influencer is not someone with lots of followers. They can be, but often that's not the case, because you're really looking for an influencer who has a very engaged audience, and an engaged audience relative to your topic, so they're interested in your particular content and what you're doing. And I'll just give you an example here. So you see the screen here. The numbers may be a bit small, depending on how big you've got your screen, but I just picked a few people here at random, and you can see the numbers of followers. And on the right-hand column, you can see the average retweets. And all that means is that's on average. How many times does a tweet that they publish get retweeted on average? So we can see for Joe at the top there, there's a bit old, this chart now, but he's got about 70,000 followers, and on average he gets 4.5 retweets. That's actually very high. We tend to count an influencer as somebody who has a retweet rate of at least 2. We can see Martin at the bottom there. It's got over 130,000 followers, but he's actually only got a retweet rate of 1. And if we look at Susan in the middle, she's only got 6,000 followers, but she's got the highest retweet rate of all of those. So on average, when Susan tweets something, it gets tweeted another 5 times. And so there isn't a direct relationship between numbers of followers and how engaged the audience is. And sometimes you can find people who've got quite small numbers of followers, but they've got a really engaged audience around a very specific topic. And they're the people that you want to find and you want to engage with. And we'll come on to how you find those people. So in some simple terms, an influencer for us is somebody who's got an engaged audience in an area that matters to you or to your product or your service. Because it doesn't matter if an influencer with 100,000 followers shares your link if their audience isn't that interested in what you're doing. So, okay, you may get a lot of impressions there, but no one's going to click through it necessarily. So for us, what you're looking for when you're looking for an influencer is someone who has an engaged audience in an area that matters to you, which is all sounds fine, but how do you find them? And does it have an impact when you do find them? And all the evidence suggests that they do have a significant impact. Increasingly, people are less trusting of advertisements, things like that. People do trust recommendations from friends and people that they respect, such as influencers. We did a survey a while back where we took a big batch of content and then we looked at it by how many people had shared it who were influencers. And so for this study, what we said was an influencer is somebody who had a retweet rate of 2 or more. So if somebody had a retweet rate of 2 or more, we counted them as an influencer. And then we segmented all the content shares. And so we could see that for the sample set we had, where content wasn't shared by anyone who had a retweet rate of over 2, the average number of shares was 706, as you can see there. Where one person shared it, who was an influencer, we could see that the number of shares went up 30% to 930. And where 3 influencers shared it, we can see the number of shares doubled in our sample set. And we can see that once 5 influencers shared it, it actually went sort of viral in a sense. So, we had a much bigger, 4 times or more the number of shares. And so for me, when I'm looking at any piece of amplification, I'm normally looking to try and get 5 influencers to share that piece of content. So that's 5 people with a retweet rate of more than 2. Because our evidence suggests that that helps me really amplify my piece of content. So I think it's a good target to set is, can I get 5 people who've got an engaged audience that matter to me and my product and get them to share it. So how do you find these people? So how do you know which influencers amplify content in your area? And I'll just take you through a couple of things that I do and a bit of guidelines before then passing over to Paul. So there are different types. So in any industry, there are the big celebrities. I suppose in content marketing, it's somebody like Joe Pulizzi. They typically have large followings. They can be really hard to reach. If you can build relationships, that's great, but they can be very hard to reach because they're in huge demand. There are lots of other types. For example, journalists. Journalists can be really great to reach because they have obviously a big audience through the platform they publish on. And one of the things I quite like doing is I quite like finding intern journalists who are quite junior. They're really grateful that you can give them information and help them, but they can also have quite big reach because, again, they can get stuff published on a big site for you. So often I search for interns who are journalists at some of the larger publications and build relationships with those people. Other people I think are important, people like academics or industry analysts, because often they have a very engaged audience and often they have authority. So I'd look for people who often write about a particular industry and again try to help them with research or information and things like that. So there are different influencer types. But in terms of how to find them, one of the things I like to do, in fact the best thing I do really, is I'll often find heavily shared content, so content that's working, content that's getting amplified. And I can do that just by going to BuzzSumo. You can use other tools or find heavily shared content, but in BuzzSumo you can type in any topic. So here I just typed in content marketing, and I can see what's the heavily shared content. And then in BuzzSumo you have this nice little button called View Sharers. So here we have a little button here called View Sharers. You can also view backlinks. And what View Sharers will do is it will show you who shared that content on Twitter. So you click that little button here, View Sharers, and sorry, just take it back. And what that will show you is all the people who shared that on Twitter, and you can resort that by average retweet rates. And what I find is that gives me a really targeted group of people, because if I find a piece of content that's really directly relevant to what I'm writing about, and it could be some technical engineering widgets or whatever it happens to be, if I find people who've shared that content, I know they're interested. So often I'll then add those people to my influencer list as people that I want to then get to share my content as well. So I find finding heavily shared content, seeing who shared it, a really good way of doing it, and Paul will show you more of that later. I also like to find authors of heavily shared content. Sometimes you can find an author who consistently gets a lot of shares. So ideally, if you're going to do anything in the future with somebody on co-creation, you'd want to look at them. And so again, you can see the authors. If you click their name in BuzzSumo, you can also see everything that they've written. You can also use discovery tools in terms of trying to find influencers. So BuzzStream have a great discovery tool, so you can type in a topic here, such as link building, and you can find relevant influencers. And you can set criteria, which Paul will touch on within BuzzStream, as to the types of influencers that you want to find. So that's another way that you can find influencers. You can do something very similar with our BuzzSumo influencer search. So you can type in a topic. Here I've typed in content marketing, and then I get a list of people, and I can resort them by their page authority, domain authority, numbers of followers, etc. And I can also, as you'll see there, save them as an influencer to an influencer list in the center there. So you can do a number of searches. So there are a number of ways you can start to find who influencers are, as well as often in your own industry, you'll get to know who the influencers are, who are the people that people respect in your particular space. And so you can begin to build an influencer list of people that you want to reach out to. Just to also say on the BuzzSumo one, you can filter by type. So sometimes to make it easier, if you're just searching for journalists, as I am, or for example, you can filter them out by type. So you do an influencer search just for journalists or just for bloggers. And sometimes it's useful to filter by their location. Maybe you're running an event in a particular city or something like that. So it can be useful to find a more targeted list of your influencers. But once you have them, my view on the sort of basics are you build an outreach, or what we call a nurturing list, a list of people you want to build relationships with. And I think my view on sort of good practice around this is that it's a relatively small list, because you simply can't engage with hundreds of people. And so I've got a BuzzSumo influencers list, and actually it's got about 40 people on it. And it started at 20, and over the years I've built it to 40. Personally, I keep it to a relatively small list of people that you can really build engagement with. And I just want to show you how you can build a bit of engagement here. In BuzzSumo, we think it's so important to build engagement with your influencers. So, and it's not just about retweeting, it's actually about having an engaging conversation. So those of you who use BuzzSumo, you'll see here that I'm on the outreach list feature. So I've got my list of influencers, everyone that I've added to the BuzzSumo list of influencers here. And you'll see there are two other tabs here. There's conversations and there's content. And if I flip to the conversations tab, what we'll show you is every time any of your influencers, so any of my 40 BuzzSumo influencers, have asked a question on Twitter. So I can instantly see the latest questions they've asked. And that allows me to simply go into the box here. I see that Neil Schaffer's asked a question, and I can reply. So I can start replying in a conversational way rather than just sharing a piece of content. I can see below him that Leodin's asked a question, and again, I can reply to that. So I can reply to questions. I can see their most popular latest tabs, and I can also search tweets from influencers. And that's a really useful feature. So here I just searched, I did this morning actually, a quick screenshot. I searched for what have my influencers said about influencers, as we're doing this webinar this morning, and I instantly can see a list of what the people in my list have said about influencers. And so I might want to say, well, you might be interested in joining the webinar today, or these are some of my tips. But it's just a way of getting conversations flowing. So, you can just put 40 people or 50 people into your list, and we'll instantly show you the questions they're asking, or you can search for any topic, tips they're sharing, for example. And the final tab is the content tab, and this is quite simple. It simply shows you the latest content that all of your influencers have published. And you can then look at it, you can share it, for example. So you don't have to go to lots and lots of different places to see what your influencers are publishing. We will show you in one place everything they're publishing, and we'll literally show you what they published in the last 15 minutes. And so you can pick it up, and then you can share it. So as a simple way, that's how I think you can find influencers and how you can begin to engage with them. But the number one point I would say in terms of all influencer marketing is you start with how can you help your influencers. You should never ask anything of an influencer until you've built a relationship, and you need to build that relationship. And that might take you 2, 3, or 4 months, but you can't ask for anything until you've built a relationship. And in my view, you start building a relationship by being helpful to your influencers. And there are lots of ways that you can do this. I'll just flip through a few of these here. You can link to their site. If you've got a highly ranked site, that's actually quite useful to them. Of course, you can recommend their services. I'm assuming at this point that you're already following them on social media, you're already commenting on some of their content, you're already commenting on their blog, you're sharing some of their content. But you can also do things like recommend their services. Maybe you have a product like we do, or you have a service where it's useful to give them free access to that or a discounted access to it. So the influencers who work with us, we do give them free access to BuzzSumo, so that they can use the tool, get familiar with it, hopefully mention it. We don't ever ask them to mention it, but I'd say probably half of them do, and that's great for us. Also, influencers, and particularly journalists, like getting insights on things. So maybe in your industry, you've got some specific types of data, something which is competitively sensitive, or something you're about to publish, which you can give them advanced access to. So often you can share research and insights with them before it becomes public. So you can make them an insider, which is useful and helpful to them. And obviously, as I said, you can share and promote their content. But I think the key thing about influencer marketing, if you take away nothing else from today, I think the key thing is the starting point is how can you help them? And once you start helping them over a period of months, you can build a relationship. And then you can do some things that Paul's going to run through as well about how you might ultimately co-create content with them or get them to share your content. But the starting point is really about helping them. So with that, I'm now going to pass over to Paul to take you through specifics of how to build a campaign.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks, everybody, for joining. I'm looking at both the places where people are from as well as the questions that are coming in. We've got people, as mentioned before, from all over. It's kind of mind-blowing how widely dispersed everybody is, and a lot of these questions are great. Getting questions about things like skyscraper technique and how you do this in a way that's efficient and scales, and we'll try to cover a lot of this. Actual example of a campaign and walk through some of the execution components. Come on. There we go. Okay. Some of you may have been on the webinar I did a couple of weeks ago on Mention.com or with Brittany Berger at Mention.com, and we talked about this case study. This is an ebook we did called Linking Outside the Box. I'm going to talk more, in that webinar we talked about the planning components involved and how you could do the planning aspects of an influencer marketing campaign to support this. I'm going to talk more about the things that happen after that in this webinar, specifically talk about how can I research influencers, nurture them, and reach out to them effectively. So a little more background about this ebook. This was a gated ebook that we targeted primarily at search engine optimization professionals. The goal of the campaign was we had 3 goals. We wanted to drive 1,000 downloads of the ebook, including 500 from non-customers. And the big thing, we wanted to increase revenue by 10%. So we were not just worried about, we set a goal of getting 100 plus unique shares, but the big thing was we wanted to drive, increase our mailing list and drive revenue. So very, very aggressive goals. Largely as a result of the influencer marketing efforts we put behind this, we were able to meet those goals. So we'll talk a little bit about how we did that. Now, some of the tools that we used were not available, including BuzzSumo, when we ran this. So I'll talk about how we would use it or what I would be doing today and what we do today. So for this ebook, because this is gated, we weren't going to be targeting journalists. So instead, we had to find different ways to get reach, and we really looked at 4 groups. The first thing we did is we looked for content collaborators. Is somebody saying they cannot hear me, or are we okay? Okay, we're okay. So we looked for content collaborators to actually influential authors on the creation of the book. And the goal there was to expand the reach, make it more credible. Beyond that, we wanted to reach out to influencers, promoters, and advocates. And promoters and advocates we viewed as one group, and influencers as another. So the goal here was to take influencers, people who we felt were influential in this niche, turn them into potential promoters and advocates, and once we did, then we were going to conduct outreach. So there were people who we came into the campaign with existing relationships, and we did work to involve them as early as possible. And then for the ones that were influencers that we wanted to build relationships with, we nurtured those relationships. Goal again for that was largely about sharing. The SEO community, at least at this point, almost exclusively, Twitter was the water cooler for that community. And so we knew if we got shares on Twitter, it was going to get retweeted, reshared, and eventually that would lead to signups, which is what happened. The last thing we did was we looked for influencers that we could target social ads at their followers. So we did this on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Twitter by far was the best performing for us. What we were doing was, Twitter ads targeted at link building influencers followers. We'll talk about that. Okay, so the first thing that we did when we were setting this up, if you were a BuzzStream customer, this is what you would do. We created a folder for the campaign, linking outside the box, and then we had really 3 projects for this, and then this one was just submissions. But the big 3 were the collaborators, and the 2 that we were doing the most work on were the influencers and the promoter. The reason why we separated these into different groups is because for each of them we had a unique goal, a workflow, and a separate template. We'll walk through each of these. Okay, for the content collaborators, primarily the main workflow that we're focused on here is just as simple as finding and researching influencers. And we're looking for ones that had, that were fairly big influencers in this niche and had good reach. Let me show you what we did. So this is BuzzStream Discovery. This is the primary tool that I would use for this, and this is what. So to do this, very simple. The search is pretty straightforward. I'm going to start by searching for, actually, I'm going to back up real quick and show you one thing. These are the people that we actually ended up collaborating on the book with. And what we did was we looked for people who were well known by our target customer and well trusted, but had a slightly different take. So at the time, lots of people were focused on guest blogging, and Smarty was somebody people really looked to for that. Lyndon Ancliffe, he was in the UK, had a big audience a big following in the UK. We liked that a lot. Elisa Scharf at Sear, we viewed her as an up-and-comer, somebody who a lot of people she was writing really good content. We thought she was covering very good ground. She also worked at Sear, which is a well-thought-of search marketing agency. And we knew that if she shared it, there was a good chance that others at that agency were going to share it, particularly since Sear is a customer of ours. Patty Mugen, somebody who's well respected in general in the link building, as the link building guy, was on most of the big pubs for this, and so Patty jumped out to us. And Lisa we thought was unique because she was covering the intersection of PR, SEO, and social. So when we searched, we started with some general searches. Greg was kind of a wild card. He doesn't really. The people who are typically reading him were more of kind of the growth hacker community. But we thought his content was so strong, and we just thought so highly of him that we thought it was going to be a good addition to the book. So in the actual search, we start with the basic link building search. So it's going to come back with a list, and then the next thing I'm going to do is limit it to people with a certain number of Twitter followers. I'm just looking and doing this for quick and dirty ways of basically separating the wheat from the chaff. Let's get the people who actually have some weight behind them. Get people who are active. This is probably longer than I would normally do. and people who are right for a website that has a high domain authority. So this just starts giving me a sense. This is BuzzStream Discovery. This is in beta right now, so it's completely free. Just go to idb.buzzstream.com. Once I go here, I have a sense of, actually, let's shorten this. Posted in the past month, let's say. So I have a list of influencers sorted by our algorithm for determining level of influence, which takes into account a number of things. You can see it comes back, one of the people it comes back with, I can see Andrew Dennis. On this search results page, I have a quick look. I can see, okay, he writes for multiple publications, so it's not like he's somebody who just writes for one pub and there's not much chance we're going to be able to get him to work on this. Topically, his main topics, link building, SEO, and online marketing. And if I look at his bio, content marketing specialist for the manual link building company. I can see that some of the content, the top 3 pieces of content that are relevant for my search term, or I can just go look at the details of his profile. When I'm going to look at the profile, what I want to see, let's actually just filter the content just for relevant. And I can see, okay, he's writing a lot for search engine land and marketing land, but I can also see he's written fairly recently for Kerboo and Biznology. If I want to go look at the details to see how often he writes for these pubs, I can go over here, see his Twitter metrics. We'll expand on these beyond Twitter, also beyond these metrics. So we'll be adding Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube by the end of the first quarter. And then I can see the pubs he's written for. See, writes for search engine land, that's where he's written the most. You can see how much his posts are shared on these pubs. But he also writes for Biznology, SEMrush, Page One, and others. So this might be a good prospect here for this collaboration. So I'm going to go ahead and add him to the project. I can also see that he's already in a BuzzStream project. So I know that we have some sort of a relationship with him already. And I'll go ahead and add him to a project. We'll go ahead and add him to that collaborators project. Assign him to me. And we'll include some of these pubs. And we are good. Okay. Now, coming probably in the next 3 weeks will be the ability to do this in bulk. So instead of doing it one at a time, you'll be able to select multiple contacts, either export them to research them, or just bulk import them into BuzzStream into a project. The other thing that Steve, I think one of the things Steve is looking at doing is long-term the ability to, and I don't know about the timing, the ability to take lists and import them into BuzzSumo's nurturing list, which would be really, really valuable as well. So once you have this, you can add, you build your list out like that. So for the collaboration and the workflow there, most of that really wouldn't happen for us within BuzzStream. That's, excuse me, this thing keeps popping up on me. The real work happens when we start looking at the influencers and the promoters. So let's go ahead and bounce back to the PowerPoint presentation, and let's look at that. Okay, for influencer advocates and promoters, we did a few things. First, we nurtured those relationships prior to the launch. To people that we viewed as likely promoters, if they were at the beginning of this project, if they were already friends of ours, either customers or people we built relationships with, we requested feedback on the ebook outline before we wrote it. If we built relationships with them through the process as we were developing the ebook, as we got closer to launch, we provided early access to the ebook and solicited feedback from them. And then when we launched it, this one is actually a shout out for our recent announcement, but this is the kind of thing we do. Thanks to all these people for helping us out with this, and we give them public shout outs. The goal of this is, one, it's improving the quality of the piece for us. Two, it drove a lot of sharing. And three, it builds loyalty. These are people who we have real relationships with, and we are helping them out, and they're helping us out, and this is a virtuous cycle. it's not a one-time thing for us. So let's look at the workflow as we do this. First thing we do is try to find influencers and research them. Then we nurture those relationships. We conduct outreach, and then we analyze the results. Okay, let's look at some of the ways that we go about doing this. Let's go ahead and start with BuzzSumo. Steve talked about this a little bit. In BuzzSumo, I'm in the content research section on most shared, and I search for link building. Now, if I just search for that, I'm going to end up with a bunch of publications that have lots of Autobots following them, or excuse me, sharing their content, and that's not going to be very helpful because I'm trying to find the people who have shared their content and leverage that. So what I do is I do these searches, and then here I start excluding domains where I know a lot of the people who are sharing that content are probably just bots. So like Marketing Land has huge share volume. Lots of it is just automated. Instead, I look for ones at pubs where I'm pretty sure the people who are sharing are going to be real people. So if I scroll down, for example, I see this one here, 11 advanced link building techniques for future SEO. Good number of people shared this. I'm going to go ahead and click on view shares. When I get to this page here, a few things I look at. Now, for us, the thing a lot of people have very specific rules for when they will add somebody that they want as an influencer, or they have sort of their pre-built algorithms. I look for things that just seem to make sense to me. If I look at this contact right here, high domain authority, huge number of followers, huge retweet ratio. Retweet ratio is just how many of his tweets are just retweets. I suspect that this person is effectively just a broadcaster. You may not meet the metric in BuzzSumo, but I don't think it's going to get me. It doesn't meet totally the smell test of what I'm looking for. Whereas, even though this is a corporate Twitter feed, if I look at this one, heavy retweet ratio, or average retweets, so their tweets get retweeted. They communicate with people. Quarter of the tweets are actually conversations, and they're doing things, and about 10% of their tweets are retweets. So I want to get a better sense of whether or not this is somebody who would be likely to share our content. And so I look at click on view the links they've shared. And when this comes up, I click on analyze links. And what this shows me as I look at it, I look for a few things. First is, what are the topics that this Twitter feed shares? What kind of content? And I see content marketing, SEO at the very front, SEM, even though it doesn't say that. I have a pretty good PPC. This is probably good. And the next thing I look at is, what kind of links do they share, and where are they from? And as I look at this, okay, they're sharing about a third of their shares. Their links are shares from their own site, but 2/3 are from others. And not only are they from just huge sites, there's a big set of ones that are coming from just very broad set of sites. So there's a pretty good chance that if I've got good content and they know of me, they'll probably share this. So if I have that information, I would go ahead and add this to this nurture group, linking outside the box. Nurture, and we're good. Okay. Now, once I have contacts in these lists, I can do a number of things. I'll click on amplification, and I can do what Steve was talking about. I'll click on, oops, wrong one. Link outside the box, nurture. I've got my list. I'm going to look for questions I can answer. I'm going to look for tweets of theirs that are popular, look at their latest. I will do searches to see if there are things that are relevant, if there are ones specific to the topic at hand, and then sharing their content. That's something, if nothing else, and Steve said it, it can't be the only thing you're doing is just retweeting people's content. It's not going to do anything. But as part of this, having this list here and being able to look at it and go share that content, that's very nice to have. Now, this all ties back in The other thing I would say is once you have the group here, export this, add these into BuzzStream. And the reason why is because what we were doing, kinds of things we do, is if you look at a project, let's go ahead and go back in BuzzStream to all contacts. So this is my master database. Effectively, this is my little black book across all of our projects that we're doing. This is everything here. So I can filter here and say, I've got a filter already saved. Actually, I don't have it saved. I'll create one here. Let's find people who are tagged with any of these tags. We'll say content marketing, SEO tools, SEO, link building, and then we'll scroll down. I could also say let's find people who have been in this specific project, because if they were good for this one, they're going to be good for the one, or that one, they're going to be good for this one. But I can also do things like show me people that I have a relationship with. And so to do that, I can say, all right, let's see people that have replied to my emails. I'm still going to have to review them, but I can say, show me people that replied to my emails in the last 90 days, or that I've tweeted with in the last 90 days. Not going to be a big list here, but you'll get the idea. This is a demo account. But once I have this list here, now keep in mind, if I'm taking these actions over here in BuzzSumo, because in BuzzStream you're automatically connecting your email, because you've connected your email and your Twitter IDs, or you can do that in BuzzStream, those tweets are automatically, and emails are automatically going to get added to the contact record, and you'll have this. So I can go create this as a saved filter, and we'll call this warmed LOTB, linking outside the box save. Okay, and I'll go ahead and take these. Let's go ahead and move them to that project. These are, we'll call these promoters. Now, most of the time what I'm going to do is I'm going to go review these, look at it, and see what's really going on there. I'll show you how I do that. Yep. So I've now got those in the project. What I would normally do is, actually I'll do this from Outreach. Once I have them in the project, let's go over to that project. And I've created a few different templates. We'll just select a couple just for example's sake. And I'll do Ben and Adria. I'll click on Outreach here, and I'm going to go ahead and start Outreach. I've got multiple templates. What we did is we created one called Linking Outside the Box Outline Feedback First, and then Outline Feedback Follow-Up is basically what this is. This is demo, but you can see how many are sent, what the reply rate is, what the open rate is, things like that. So let's click on Start. And what I've got on the left-hand side is my information about the contact record, and here's the template. And obviously I'd take this, personalize it. Hi, Adria. You know, hope all is well. It's been a while since we talked. She's not here anymore, but you get the idea. We've got this. And then I can go send and go to next contact. Okay. But I've got my information here where I can look at it and see this is the actual email we sent to her. Hey, Adria, Happy New Year. Hope all is well as it distilled. How about the Seahawks? She's in Seattle. Working on a big new ebook. This is the template here, and this is the one that Matt sent. Over here, we've got reminders set up. If we don't get a reply in 3 days, we'll get a reminder, and then we can send the follow-up to that email, and to the list of people who have not followed up in that time frame. So the key there is for the people who we already had a relationship with, we were taking actions to engage them as early as possible, get them involved in the actual project, and those people were heavy sharers of this once we released it. And the key there, and I think one of the really valuable things is that one of the most frustrating things for me is that I do all these things online. I share people's content, I communicate with them, but when it actually comes to a campaign, all of that information is so hard to get to. It's as though it just scattered in the wind when I first did it. And so linking those two together, being able to have a nurture list and also have a list of all those people in BuzzStream gives you that ability to leverage those for your campaigns. Let me see. I think I covered everything, but let's make sure. Other tools you can use. That same search that we did in for content shares, same thing you can do doing like a Twitter influencer search in the application section in BuzzSumo. You can do content search in BuzzSumo to find influential authors. Same influencer searchers in BuzzStream Discovery. If you're looking for people who have Twitter followings, for people who, you can look for people who are, influential authors who have a Twitter feed or are on Twitter, and you can add those into BuzzStream also and keep track of that. And for those of you who are using BuzzStream, you can create prospecting lists in the BuzzMarker, do things like go to a Google search and turn those into prospecting lists and work through those. Okay, I think Twitter campaigns, briefly. What we did here is we found people who were specifically focused on link building. If you're doing just Twitter follower campaigns focused on people's Twitter followings, it's very easy for these to be not very targeted and very expensive. So, for example, if we had picked people like Rand Fishkin, very influential in the SEO community, he's got 70,000 followers that range anywhere from, individual bloggers to hardcore SEOs to technical SEOs to people who are specifically focused on link building. Instead, we looked for people like Ross Hutchins, Patty Mugen, Ray Hoffman, Wayne Barker, people like this who specifically write about link building, and we know that the people who follow them care about that topic. So at the top of their feed, their followers' feeds, they were seeing the ad for linking outside the box, which kept our costs down and made it very, very profitable. So we did people following link building influencers that didn't follow BuzzStream because we could already reach those people. That is it. We got lots and lots of questions.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks, Steve. I appreciate everything that you guys were showing us during the webinar. We do have a lot of different questions. Paul, if you could turn off the sound on your machine, that would be great. Thank you. The first question that we have is, actually we've had several, about how to scale influencer outreach. This is how Craig worded it. He said, the process is very clear. Can you speak to a use case? Wait, sorry, that's the wrong one. I'm not sure who asked it, but the question was basically, how do you scale this when you want to reach out to influencers? Someone else suggested early in the questions that the process would take maybe the full-time work of a VA just to get it done. So would either of you like to talk about how you can scale this process?
Steve, you want me to talk about it? There's multiple parts of it. I'll talk specifically about the outreach part first. Yeah, I saw that question about the skyscraper technique and how you can do this. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the skyscraper technique, this is something Brian Dean had talked about, where you find a piece of content that's performed pretty well, performed very well, got tons of shares. I'm simplifying here. It may be out of date, or you have new information and you feel like you can make it even better. You're going to go out to those people as well as, and you're going to push on that. And so you could be reaching out to lots and lots of people. So as far as, and you may be taking a different, slightly different tack on that piece of content, but the key is that you've got something that was shared or linked to by a very large audience. Okay, as far as the outreach process, the thing that I think you get in trouble with is if you just send a blast email. I think that's a very risky proposition. If you're going to do that, you better be pretty comfortable with if you're on like a site that's like an affiliate site and you don't care that much about it, or you're doing something to where you don't care much about your brand, I think you're safe doing that. But there's a lot of different areas of the process that you can automate and reduce the time involved to make it a much faster process. One is the collection of all the contact information and all the metrics. Okay, so if you take that list of, say, links and pull that into BuzzStream, it's going to go find it's going to help you find contact information, and it's going to collect metrics across a lot of different things. Domain authority, if you care about it, Twitter following. It's going to give you lots of stuff that you can look at and filter and things like that.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, go ahead. As far as nurturing, that's a more. Steve, if you want to talk to that, that's a bigger question.
Sure. Yeah. No. Very happy to. Sorry, Paul. You just need to. Yep. Got this mute. Good. If you could just mute your microphone, that's right. Okay. Yeah. No. On the notion, I mean, firstly, I have some concerns with the concept of scaling influencer marketing in a sense, because it seems to me that it's, by its very nature, it's about building relationships, and so to me it's about focusing on a limited number that you're targeting. I understand the need to scale the whole operation, but in terms of building relationships, I think they're sort of almost one-to-one. You're building relationships sort of one at a time, really. So they are difficult to scale. It is time-consuming work, and that's why I think you have a limited number. But I think the key to me is about this building relationships. I saw some of the other questions there about, how do we do this, and if I'm an institution, how do I help? And my view is always to start thinking about, okay, I've got a limited number of influencers here. How do I help them? And it really is thinking about, to me, what would be helpful to them. So of course I can share their content and I can comment, etc. But it might be you're an institution, but you have some really useful information which might be helpful to one of your journalist influencers, and you could share that with them. So often in any business you have something which is sort of unique in terms of information that you might be able to share, or that might be helpful for you to an influencer. As I say, also you may have tools or products that you can provide at a discount or make available to an influencer. But to me, it's that nurturing process, and I was quite serious when I said it can take quite a few months. I think if you just send an email blast and ask people to start connecting with you or sharing your content, there's nothing worse. I do get emails occasionally. I'm not an influencer, but I get emails occasionally saying, would you share this piece of content? And I'm thinking, I don't really know who you are. You're asking me to share a piece of content. An influencer builds their reputation over many years of being quite careful about what they share so that people can trust what they share. So an influencer, by their very nature, is unlikely just to share a random piece of content. They need to get to know you, to build a bit of trust with you first. So I think it's quite a slow process, and there's no quick fix. I think it takes time to build your influencer lists, and I just can't emphasize enough, I suppose, that process of nurturing. So yeah, sometimes when people talk about scaling my influencer marketing, I get a little bit nervous, but that may just be me.
Thanks. That's a good perspective. I have two tool questions. Someone is asking if BuzzSumo only shows you the influencer reshares of Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, and is asking about the possibility of Instagram. Would you like to speak to if we're going to be adding any of those things, Steve?
Sure, I can jump on that. And I should say that BuzzSumo doesn't show that. It shows you the numbers of shares across all the networks. We are looking to add Instagram. Instagram is obviously slightly more complicated when it comes to content because you can't put a link in Instagram. But we are looking at what we can do on Instagram. But we'll show you the number of shares of a piece of content on the other major networks. We only show you the sharers on Twitter. So we actually only show the people who shared it on Twitter. Although for those of you who've used the BuzzSumo Facebook Analyzer tool, if you type in the title of a post into the search box, you normally find everyone who's then shared that article on Facebook as well. So it's just a little tip of a way of trying to work around to see who shared it on Facebook that works. So we only show the people who shared it when you click View Sharers, the people who shared it on Twitter, because that's public data. We don't have that for LinkedIn and the other networks. So yes, Instagram, we're looking at adding influencers to Instagram, but we probably won't show numbers of sort of likes or favorites there. We're in the middle at the moment of just working out what we will show when Facebook turn on their new emoticons, so that rather than like, you can be angry or you can empathize, etc. So we're reworking what we're going to show when that gets turned on at the moment. So that's occupying us a little bit.
Thanks, Steve. And Paul, here's a question about the email tool from Lisa. She's wondering if the email tool in BuzzStream is free. Could you speak to maybe what's free and what's not?
Sure. BuzzStream Discovery, the tool for finding influencers, is free while it's in beta. The BuzzStream, the outreach tool, is not free. Starts for solo plan at $19 and goes up from there. But it is a free trial.
Great, thanks. So here's a question. This is from someone who's asking and said that the process is very clear, but is wondering if you could speak to a use case for a company that's not in marketing, say a software company.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I mean, the process is really much the same, I think. It's trying to find the people who are influential in your particular space, or whatever your particular niche of software is. I think it's still the same process of who are the people who amplify content in your area, who are the people that people listen to. And I would again go back to my very starting point, which Paul showed really well, which is trying to find pieces of content which are very niche, or niche, if I'm in the US, which is very niche in terms of your particular content in your area, and then seeing who shared that content. Do they regularly share it? And also, the tools like Paul showing, BuzzStream's discovery tool is great. You can put a very specific niche topic in there and see who's actually influential, who's writing articles about the very specific topics that you're after. So the process to me is one that's much the same, but obviously you're looking at a very narrow niche area. The problem when we look at content marketing in areas like that is everyone is into marketing, so everyone's writing lots of content. You generally find less content, less influencers in very small niches, but in some ways that makes them much better to work with because you have sort of less people you can target and build relationships with. But I would say the process is much the same, almost regardless of the area that you're in. Sometimes the influencers may vary a bit more. Maybe it will be more researchers, analysts. Sometimes it may be more journalists. Other times it may be bloggers and people like that. So depending on the industry, the nature of the influencers may vary a little bit. But I think the process is much the same. But I don't know, Paul, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I think that nails it.
So here's a question that that you guys might want to take in turns. What are the worst outreaching mistakes you've seen people make?
Okay, I can jump in first. I mean, I'd say the ones that I talked about, there are lots of bad outreach mistakes, which I think I probably made in my early days as well. But I think the key to me is that you have to build a relationship before you can really start to work with an influencer. Even if you just want to send them comments or send them a draft, as Paul was saying, which is a great idea, send a draft, what do you think about this? You need some relationship first, so they might engage and review your draft and give you comments. I think just approaching influencers too early, I think trying to do it in a mass format is dangerous as well. And what you don't want to do is upset an influencer because by their nature they're influential. So I think my advice to you take it softly, you build it over time. So I would simply say not approaching people cold, not doing it on mass scale, not making it look automated. If you send the same automated mail to lots of people and it looks automated, I would always send sort of personal drafts, but I might only be targeting 10 or 20 influencers. At BuzzSumo, when we started, we did target 20 influencers, and you won't see any ads from BuzzSumo. So if you think about how did you hear about us, we have terrible Google search engine rankings. Unfortunately, we haven't done much work on that. So you probably found us by reading an article that somebody shared or something an influencer shared, and we now have almost 180,000 subscribers. It wasn't done through ads. It was done because we approached initially just 20 influencers and built strong relationships with those influencers. So yeah, that would be some of my thoughts, but I'm sure Paul's got lots.
Yeah, quite a few. So if you want to give yourself a nice giggle, just at some point go do a Google search on PR spam and just give yourself about 20 minutes to just enjoy the tirade you read out there. So, and you'll get a sense of the risk of what happens if you just go out there and spam people without putting any thought to it. I would say, so there's a couple things. One, people are so, they are so tuned to the emails of people trying to send emails that feel like they're personalized, but they're obviously not. So they're going to know that. If I was going to say the big mistake people make over and over again is they don't start with the question, what's in it for them? every single email that you send, before you send it, you better have a good answer, or you better at least create segments where you can say, this group is going to be interested in what I have to say because I'm providing this. So for example, if you're sending an email to a journalist, they have a very different desire than if you're sending it to, say, somebody who has a passion blog. And you better understand that that journalist, they want a story, they want it fast, they don't want their time wasted, and they want to know that you're going to get back to them with something that's valuable to their readers. Whereas if it's a passion blogger, the relationship's going to matter a whole lot more. The key, though, is whatever it is, you better start with the question, before I send to this group of people, they're going to be interested because of this. And if you can answer that well, your response rates will be good, and you'll get promotion in the form of shares, links, or whatever it is you're looking for.
Thanks. Here's another one. What is your opinion on reaching local influencers through direct means of communication instead of digital?
I think it's a really good question. If you have people who are local, I think it's a great thing to do. So, for example, I'm normally in London, in the UK, but I'm in Australia at the moment, and I spent some time in Melbourne, and I made a very specific point of mailing some of the people who are based in Melbourne to meet up and have coffee, and it just builds so much stronger relationships. So a number of the people I've been talking to digitally for a while, it was fantastic just to meet up and have coffee with them in Melbourne, for example. So I think if you have a chance to meet them, I mean, obviously once you have a relationship and things like that, it's a really powerful thing to do. So every time I'm in a new city, I look up people that I'm connected with in those cities, and I say, would you like coffee, lunch, etc., depending on how well I know them. I think it's really useful and really powerful.
Totally agree. Anytime you can do offline sort of engagement, it's going to improve all your online work. It's not always possible, but when you can, it's really powerful.
Yeah, conferences are another good option for that too, if you try and connect with people when you're there. Here's a question which I'll just handle. It's, how do you know an influencer's retweet rate? Basically, our statistic is an average of the retweets they get every time they tweet. So let me give you another question. All right. So here's one for you, Steve. How do you save influencers within BuzzSumo or on Twitter?
Okay. In BuzzSumo, it's fairly straightforward. So if you see the people you're looking at people who've shared content, or you've done an influencer search, alongside their name on the right-hand side, there's a little button that says Save Influencer. When you click that button, it'll do a drop-down, and it'll show you the outreach list you've created. So you do need to start by going into amplification, outreach lists, create a list, and then every time you come across somebody that you'd like to add to a list in BuzzSumo, literally alongside their name, it's just to the right of their name, you'll see Save Influencer, and that will give you a little drop down of your outreach list, and you just literally save them to that list. At the moment, there's no way of importing your Twitter lists into the BuzzSumo outreach list, and that's something quite a few people have asked for, so we are looking at adding that. So if you've spent time building up a nice Twitter list, you can then pull that straight into your BuzzSumo outreach list to do the nurturing. And of course, everything in BuzzSumo is exportable. So once you've built an outreach list, you can then export it, as Paul was saying, into your BuzzStream database and manage your communications with them and email, etc., through BuzzStream.
Great, thanks. Now we're coming up on an hour. We still have some questions that haven't been answered. I did just want to take a second though and thank everyone who attended the webinar today. We understand if you need to go. You will be getting an email from us that will include a link to the recorded demo as well as to the slide share. I think that Steve and Paul are willing to handle a couple more questions, but we wanted to be sensitive to the time that you've spent with us, and thank you again for your time. So reach out to us via email if you have any questions that didn't get covered here. And if you can stick around a little bit longer, I'll throw out a few more of the questions that have come in. Here's one. When nurturing, do the emails and tweets need to be from your Twitter account, or should they come on a personal basis? For example, from your own account?
I have a personal view on this. I've always made it different. I don't know. I always do it from my personal account. I think relationships are people-to-people relationships, and so personally, I develop that relationship sort of individually, really. So I might share stuff from a BuzzSumo account, but in terms of my main relationships, I often build them one-to-one with my personal account.
Great, thanks. Another question is it okay to mass email if the authors you're reaching have posted your content many times before?
I can give my thoughts. Go. You want to answer that, Steve, or you want me to answer that?
No, happy for you to.
Yeah, I mean, I would go back to that. Try to put yourself in their shoes. How is it going to feel? How's it going to seem? If this is somebody who you've communicated with multiple times, somebody who's, let's say, even in your customer list, or things like that, you can. I don't have a problem sending a templated email, but I'd be very sure of that. And also, I'd keep in mind that if you're going to blast out a mass email to people, and if all your relationship is that they've shared your content, you run the risk of forget the whether or not it's going to be effective. Just for a sec, let's ignore that. Let's ignore the fact that it may impact that relationship long term and the likelihood that they're going to share your things on an ongoing basis. If you do that, you also run risk of deliverability issues. So you send a bunch of emails, you don't have an unsubscribe in it, and a bunch of people are getting this and hitting the spam button. That is going to affect you. So that's what I would say. I would just, with anything, look at it and think, if I got this myself, if I was this person, is a better way to think of it, how would I respond to this?
That's great, thanks. So let's do one more question for each of you. Steve, someone is asking if you could repeat the tip about how to see Facebook shares.
Yeah, no, in BuzzSumo we have a Facebook Analyzer tool. It's in the agency plan, or if you sign up for a free agency plan, there's a free 2-week trial of it, so you can just go and try it out. But basically, take the title of the post, go to the Facebook Analyzer tool, and in the Facebook Analyzer tool you can search for any topic or any page. But when you're searching for a topic, put in the title of the post. And what I find is typically you see all the people who then shared that post, not all of them because they may not have shared the title, but often they have done. And so it's a really good way, just put in the title of the post, and sometimes you'll then get 30, 40 or more people who've shared that on Facebook. So I find it a really good way of trying to see who's shared it on Facebook. It's a bit of a workaround because we don't have access to all the data, but on Twitter, we see everybody who shared it, but on Facebook, it's a really good way. And in fact, the Facebook Analyzer tool is great to play with because just put in a topic and see what people are sharing on Facebook. I mean, at one level, I'm worried about Facebook. I mean, I think the Shareaholic survey showed that I think 26% of all clicks to websites now come from Facebook. It's huge. It's almost too dominant. And so I know lots of companies, B2B marketing companies say, well, we don't use Facebook, but actually if 26% of all clicks to websites come from Facebook, you probably need to be doing something on Facebook, unfortunately. So I think Facebook's a really interesting area, and it's one that we've been doing a lot of research on more recently.
Thanks, Steve. And last question for you, Paul, is this: do you have a step-by-step guide to the process you described for your book promotion?
Okay, so the steps, well, first of all, a lot of this is put in the presentation. I've got slides that will be included in this. In the presentation, I've got slides that show these details, so you'll have that there. Also, the recording to this will be included there. There's a blog will be included, and you'll get a link to that. There's a blog post that Matt Gratt did when we did this about, and I'll have to find it. I'll figure out what the URL is, but I think if you did a search on the BuzzStream blog, just did a Google search for BuzzStream blog, owned, earned, and paid media ebook, there's a good description of many of those steps. actually most of the
Great.
steps. The other thing I'd say is if you want to contact me directly, my email is paul@buzzstream.com, and I'm happy to get on the phone and walk anybody through that who'd like to see it.
Super. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for your time. Paul, we appreciate the case study and how you promoted the book. Steve, thanks for all the input on BuzzSumo. And we will end the webinar here. We appreciate all your questions. Thanks for the time that you've spent with us. Look for an email that includes a link to the recorded demo as well as the slide deck. Thanks, everyone.